Shopify is a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business and sell more with less effort thanks to the Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redcircle, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redcircle now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/redcircle.
Live from Liverpool, The Dark Paranormal, Season 18. Hello everyone, and it is finally here. We are at the end of Season 18, and it is indeed our finale. Now, the reason we've chosen this specific experience for the finale is because, well, it's kind of intangible. But also, I've received from the submitter both a photograph and a still video frame, which for me validates this experience just as much as the experience we covered from Ireland about 10 seasons ago. In that submission, the submitter provided about maybe 5 or 6 photographs documenting their demonic scratches, a car crash, other things that had taken place in their house. In this instance, the submitter sadly does not want me to share those photographs simply because they were quite high up in the UK banking field, and they fear that the photographs will be recognised, i.e. location-wise. Also, one does have the bank name, which, yes, could be scrubbed out, but they're adamant the location would be recognised. And given, as you will hear, they did inquire amongst staff if they'd encountered anything strange in the building, they believe they would be outed, and that's something they don't want to happen, because they are a happy-go-lucky, sceptical sort of person. And sadly, we still do live in a world where a belief in the paranormal can sometimes give you a bad reputation, or should we say at least tarnish your reputation. And hopefully that will change. But for now, the submitter does not feel secure to share those photographs. But believe me, the reason it is the finale is out of everything we've covered this season, and believe me, I believe many of the experiences, if not all, we've covered, this one, for me, is beyond doubt. A few reasons why. For example, if somebody states I wish to remain anonymous, they very rarely give a reason why. With this email, I received a separate email explaining why, which was almost as long as the submission, along with the photographs. I often tell you to leave your disbelief at the door. In fact, I do it every episode. This is one experience where I could say, leave your disbelief or bring it with you, because I am convinced this experience took place, and by all accounts, is still taking place. But before we reach our finale, as usual, a few quick announcements regarding Season 19. Firstly, we do have all of the slots filled, but as you know, we are a fluid show, and if you believe you have an experience which suits the Dark Paranormal format, email us, contact@thedarkparanormal.com, and if it's right for Season 19, it will find a space. Secondly, Season 19, as mentioned, will bring forth the video releases of Dark Realms. So if you aren't already subscribed, go to youtube.com/thedarkparanormal, and you will see those videos on the release day. Don't worry if YouTube isn't your thing, nothing will change on this feed, you will still receive that audio format, so nothing changes there. And finally, a quick shout out to our Patreons, and also a reminder of what you receive when you join Patreon. This season we moved our Patreon thank yous to the end of the show, and we received lots of feedback saying people enjoyed listening how many people were joining our community at the beginning of the show. So my job is to make sure that the beginning of the show can both feature those names, yet still remain within a reasonable opening time scale of around 5 minutes. I appreciate this seems to be overrunning, but it is the finale and there is news to share. From season 19, the names will revert to the beginning. So if you'd like your name called out during season 19, I would suggest strongly you go to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal, and there, for less than the cost of a sit-in coffee per month, you will receive not only everything on our main feed, both ad-free and before everyone else. For example, our Patreons heard this finale on Wednesday. They will hear the debut before anyone else. They'll be the first to see the Dark Realms videos uploaded only to Patreon initially, and also they can gain access to the entire back catalogue of Dark Bites, a weekly 30-minute show where we cover the shorter experiences that we receive, currently standing at over 100 hours worth of Patreon-only content. From today, we do not return until Friday the 28th of February. Therefore, if you need your paranormal fix, plus a new weekly episode every week, now is the time to sign up. Also, and I say it each time because it's true, you are joining the best paranormal community online anywhere. And that's not hyperbole, that's from experience and witnessing it grow over a period of years. So if you sound like a like-minded individual, go over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. But right now, it's time. Lower those lights, make yourself comfortable for the final time this season, and most importantly, leave your disbelief at the door, or in this case, bring it with you. I don't think it will truly make a difference, as we hear all about what was left in Japan stands outside my London door. I never considered myself a believer in ghost stories or anything paranormal. I always chalked up odd occurrences that I would have to tired eyes or stress. I have spats of relentless pressure working in the banking sector. But 2 years ago, I was asked to go and oversee the opening of a new office in Japan, a 12-month contract. And that final month in Japan has left me with memories I simply can't dismiss. Even my tried and tested usual method of stress, pressure, exhaustion. I'm sorry, but no. I cannot explain this. Call me paranoid, and I'm sure many of you will, but this will be anonymous. Kevin, I've shared 2 photographs with yourself that I wish you not to post. They're for your eyes only. But I work in a very high public sector job, and the chance or risk of being identified is not one I'm willing to take. Yet, having found your podcast, I am looking for answers. You see, what I experienced, the fear, the intrusive thoughts, the paranoia, continues to haunt me. I'm self-diagnosing here, but I honestly think it's almost PTSD. I've wrote down every detail as objectively as I can, though even now I wonder if my recollections are entirely reliable. I can't put this to you as 100% accurate, only because the number of fight or flight responses blur a small percentage. But this is as honest a confession of the events that unfolded that I can submit, all of which I still can't explain. I arrived in Japan with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The firm put me up in a lovely apartment and paid a generous disturbance payment. So I was determined to embrace the challenge of living in a new culture. The bank where I was placed was located in a quiet business district in a mid-sized city, far enough from Tokyo to feel intimate, yet modern enough to leave little room for any ancient buildings or things which may have fed into my subconscious from a spooky standpoint. As I was told to expect, The building was a study in modernity. Gleaming glass facades, perfectly aligned columns. The interior was so meticulously organized that every movement from staff felt almost choreographed. In the first few months, I settled into a very nice routine that was both comforting but rigorous. I would wake early, catch the train, exchange polite greetings in extremely broken Japanese with colleagues, and then dive into my daily tasks, starting with my familiar ones, balancing accounts, processing transactions, then more unfamiliar territory in interviewing new staff. Finally, my last part of the day was to hold a Zoom call with the UK, just to fill them in on what was going on, any differences and any challenges we faced. Having suffered previous mental health challenges, I became a keen journaler, and I swear by its efficacy. So I bought a small book so I could do some journaling whilst in Japan, writing down every tiny observation I could, trying to immerse myself in the culture, noticing differences in how people communicate. I kept this small book in my top drawer in my office. It was during those early days that I first noted hints of something unusual. One rainy evening, while leaving the office later than usual, I walked along a glass corridor adjacent to the main workspace. I caught my reflection on the polished floor, which was ordinary enough, except for the fact that behind me, briefly, a figure appeared. For a single heartbeat, I was convinced someone was about to brush past me, so I spun around to see an empty corridor. I told myself it was a trick of the light or maybe my exhaustion. Stopping and looking around as expected, it was totally dead. So this kind of supported my thoughts. But over the weeks, small irregularities began to accumulate. For example, a door I was sure I would close before I would be the last leaving the office would greet me the next morning, first person in the office, ajar. Its handle gently swaying as if it had been used only moments before my arrival. Now, as acting manager, I had full access to the bank's state-of-the-art security system. It would also email me any movements throughout the night to my email address. So once I was in the office, I would fire up my machine and I would go right to my emails to check if the security system had sent anything over. Regulations meant cleaners were only allowed in each office overnight when accompanied by a security guard. So I would usually have 2 or 3 emails of videos showing them enter, clean, and leave. They would usually leave by 1 a.m. and that door was still closed. Yet it would be open on arrival. As it was a manual thing for me to turn on and off those motion sensors, in theory, the door opening should have been caught. However, the final video was always me entering the office to that door ajar. Then I began to notice things. For example, the digital clocks in every corridor and meeting room began acting strangely. On several occasions, I'd be busy working, drafting emails, or compiling reports, and I'd glance up to check the time and find the numbers had frozen for a disconcerting number of seconds before resuming as if nothing had happened. At first, I put these down to mechanical glitches, but the increasing frequency and different number of clocks began to unsettle me. I mentioned my concerns to a couple of good English-speaking colleagues. Most brushed them off, attributing the oddities to the idiosyncrasies of a busy, well-used building. However, one elder colleague, Mr. Hayashi, who had been with the bank for decades, gave me a very brief, yet enigmatic look when I brought up the disturbances. "The building has moods," he said quietly. Leaning in, he said something along the line of, "Moods that modern eyes can't always understand." I didn't push him at the time, though in hindsight I wish I did, because that sentiment has since echoed in my mind. His hinting at some awareness of something deeper than mere architectural quirks. As my placement entered its final month, the routine I'd grown accustomed to began to unravel in small, disconcerting ways. I was determined to finish my work before returning to the UK, but every day brought with it a subtle escalation of, well, the unexplained. One Friday evening stands out vividly in my memory. I'd stayed late to complete a report, and the bank was nearly empty. At least our floor was, save for the cleaners who would start early on a Friday. Above me, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the only sounds were the soft whir of the air conditioning and the distant, almost imperceptible rustle of the cleaning crew working in the corridors. In that heavy silence, I began to feel an eerie sensation. One I've never had, unless I've been with people. A feeling I was not alone, but I most certainly was. Sat at my desk, I felt a prickle on my back. It moved up to my neck. I turned slowly, and in the reflection of the window behind me, I caught sight of a figure at the far end of the corridor. It was impossible to make out any distinct features. The form was blurry and seemed to be made of shifting shadows, but it was unmistakably human in outline. Maybe out of fear or hope I would rationalize this, I didn't turn to the corner. I stared at the reflection in the window. I blinked several times, certain the figure was playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, I initially felt relief because the figure was gone. Until, studying the reflection, I stopped breathing, as I realized it hadn't gone. It had simply moved into the corner and the darkness of the corridor. I blinked twice very hard, and it was finally gone. I slowly turned around, my heart pounding, and I desperately tried not even to catch a glimpse of that corridor in my peripheral vision. Instead, I focused on my screen, I returned to my work with an anxious awareness, and trying not to think that every movement in that building may hide something inexplicable. The days that followed was like an escalation of these unnerving events. I'd find files on my desk rearranged in subtle but deliberate ways, as if someone had rifled through them. More disturbing was the fact my journal had disappeared from the top drawer. My carefully noted observations had vanished without a trace. I searched everywhere, asking colleagues if they'd seen it or seen any sight of it, but no one admitted to anything. I felt as if the building itself, or something inhabiting it, wanted me to forget the details of what I'd witnessed. Because although journals are used for your internal thoughts, I was also logging the strange experiences. Not long after, I began to see the figure again, though only in passing glimpses. One afternoon, I made my way through a corridor to attend a late meeting. I saw a dark shape reflected in a set of mirrored glass doors. For a split second, I could see what appeared to be a bald man stood directly behind me. I even held the door open, but my smile as I turned into a frown, as I was greeted with nothing but the endless rows of closed offices bathed in fluorescent light. I began to wonder if my isolation and stress were amplifying my imagination. But the sensation of being watched was growing too intense to ignore. On another occasion, whilst working in a meeting room again late in the evening, I heard what I can only describe as a soft murmur. A series of quiet, indistinct whispers that seemed to emanate from behind the wall. Pen down, I listened intently, trying to discern if the voices formed words, but they remained unintelligible, like a distant conversation in a language I couldn't quite place, neither Japanese nor English. So I left the room and I checked the room the wall adjoined. The small, 3-seater around a table, dark, locked room. Empty. Well, I hurriedly finished my work and left the room. I felt, though, as if the murmur were following me, echoing softly in the empty corridors long after I'd passed through, quickening my pace.
Shopify is a global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business and sell more with less effort thanks to the Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/redcircle, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/redcircle now to grow your business no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/redcircle.
Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed?
Can I make my side softer?
Can I make my side firmer?
Can we sleep cooler?
Sleep Number does that. Cools up to 8 times faster and lets you choose your ideal comfort on either side. Your Sleep Number setting. And now save 50% on the new Sleep Number limited edition smart bed. Plus free home delivery when you add a base. Ends Monday. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. Learn more at sleepnumber.com.
A turning point came on a night when the disturbances coalesced into something I can only describe as a direct encounter. It was a particularly long and tiresome evening at the bank. I'd stayed behind once more to finish some last-minute work, and by the time I glanced at the clock it was well past 9 p.m. The building was hushed to a near-silent hum. As I focused on my computer screen, the overhead lights began to flicker in an almost hypnotic rhythm. At that moment, I sensed more strongly than ever before I was being watched. My office, which I kept the door open during work hours, because with helping new staff I was in and out of there like a fiddler's elbow, I was only in there really when everyone had left and I could concentrate. But my computer desk faced the wall, meaning my back faced the entire office. I turned slowly, looking through the windows of my office to the emergency exit at the end of the corridor. And there, bathed in the uneven glow of the flickering lights, I saw that figure again. This time, not a fleeting peripheral glimpse. Blinking several times only made it more solid. The figure stood motionless. It was facing away from me, a foot or two from the wall it was nearest to, as if waiting. It had its back to me, so I couldn't make out any face or defining features. It still seemed as if it was made of fleeting shadows, though the edges seemed more solid and only blurred in and out in the darkness. It also seemed to be wet. I felt both terror and an inexplicable sorrow emanating from this presence, an emotion I can only describe in hindsight as melancholic dread. I stood from my chair, frozen for what felt like an eternity, unsure whether to call out or flee or dial for help. When I mustered the courage to step forward even a single step, the figure dissolved, leaving me with only a residual chill and the sensation that I had intruded on something private, like I was the intruder. Well, that night I could not sleep. I lay awake in my cramped office quarters, replaying the image of that ghostly figure in my mind. Even though I ruled nothing out, I leant heavily towards skepticism. But even I began to wonder if the figure was some sort of echo of someone long gone from the bank, a spirit caught up in the hum of everyday business. Or maybe a manifestation, something hinted to by Mr. Hayashi, of the building's own suppressed history. But I never found anything concrete to support that theory. In truth, I didn't really look either. And even my attempts to bring the topic into conversations with colleagues yielded only acknowledgements of strange feelings and unexplained moments, annoyingly without any further elaboration. When I returned from Japan, I was relieved that returning to the familiarity of the UK would allow me to leave these experiences behind. But the unsettling events did not remain confined to the bank nor Japan. A few days after settling into my modest flat back home, I began noticing similar anomalies. One night, whilst half asleep watching TV in the living room, I caught a glimpse of a silhouette in the reflection of my window to the left. At first, I thought it was a trick of the streetlights. It was a very blustery night. But it dawned on me the shape was disturbingly similar to the figure I'd seen in Japan. A vague outline of a person, this time in a long, what appeared to be, dark coat. I rubbed my eyes and convinced myself it was just my imagination, and it did disappear. But the feeling of being watched in my own flat lingered long after it went away, as did the fact of how it appeared to be even more solid and looking through a fourth-floor window. And then came the dreams. I used to dismiss nightmares as a product of either jet lag or a wearing mind, but these were different. They carried a weight and clarity that I couldn't ignore. One reoccurring dream found myself back at that bank, walking down a corridor that stretched endlessly into the darkness. In the distance, the figure appeared again. This time, it moved slowly towards me, its movements deliberate and unhurried. A bald man, a dark coat, dripping with water. It seemed like it wanted to communicate something with me without words. I attempted to speak, but the dream left me paralyzed, unable to even cry out. I woke with a start, my heart pounding, the image of that silent visitor seared into my memory. I couldn't help but feel that these dreams were not mere products of an overactive mind, but a continuation of what I'd experienced in Japan. I was convinced now this was just in my head. A haunting that followed me across a continent or four. Ridiculous. A few weeks after returning, whilst reviewing some of the old files on my computer, I then discovered something very unsettling. Several images, grainy, low-resolution stills, that had somehow been captured by the bank's surveillance cameras. Ones I'd never noticed before. In one of these sequences was the unmistakable outline of a figure stood near a glass partition. The timestamp corresponded with one of the evenings when I was alone in the building. I saved the images on a folder labelled Unexplained on my computer, and I have never looked at them since, with the exception of sending them to you. They're a silent reminder of the events I witnessed, a piece of evidence that refuses to fit any rational explanation. They are attached, Kevin, but as it bears the bank name and the building will be recognised, please do not post these anywhere. The experiences drove my anxiety skyward. So I sat one night to try and rule everything out, to regain my sanity. But the more I tried to rationalise the events, the more I felt something intangible had taken root in my life. It began to affect my waking day. I would avoid long corridors at night, be it in my bank or on my own street. I rearranged all the furniture in my flat, meaning the TV was no longer near the window, hopefully stopping any hovering spectral presence appearing in reflections or in the periphery of my vision. Still, despite these efforts, I could not escape the feeling that the boundary between the ordinary and the uncanny had been irrevocably blurred for me. It was like a virus you wake feeling even worse from. It became my last thought at night and the first thought when I woke up. I started to question my own sanity. Was it possible that the stress of a new environment, the isolation of a foreign country, had all rendered me vulnerable to hallucinations? I again attempted to keep a meticulous log of any new odd occurrence. The exact time a door was left open, any temperature drops in the office in London, what times the clocks began freezing. I'd log the precise moments of the clocks when they'd freeze for a few seconds. But even these detailed notes could not dispel the nagging suspicion that I was not entirely alone. The evidence I gathered was too consistent and too persuasive to be chalked up solely to overactive nerves, to the point I debated stopping logging everything altogether. Maybe I was feeding my own fear. I reached out to a therapist who'd done an excellent job of explaining the power of the subconscious, the unfamiliarity of new places, and touching on the fact part of my decision to agree to go to Japan followed a messy breakup. According to her, instead of allowing myself to recover from mental beatings, I placed my attention elsewhere, meaning the stress, the challenge, the move, and company expectations, which were all big enough, but I was placing them on an unresolved pain. Talking with her, I felt better. That was rational. That made sense. Then, one particular incident cemented my prior irrational beliefs. I woke early one morning to find a series of strange, foggy patterns on my kitchen window. At first glance, they resembled the natural condensation of a cold night. On closer inspection, the shapes formed a vague outline, as if trying to mimic a human silhouette. I stared for a good while, unable to decide if it was an atmospheric quirk or something far more sinister. I tried my best to rationalize it, but the sensation of a presence remained, pressing at the edges of my awareness, reminding me that the line between my past in Japan and my present life in the UK seemed to be growing perilously thin. Again, I've added a photo. Anyone I've showed this photo to and said, "What do you see?" without any context, every last person has agreed, a human outline. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this whole ordeal has been the way the figure continues to manifest in my dreams. Over time, they've become too detailed, too deliberate to be dismissed as mere subconscious anxieties. A recurring dream I find myself in is that endless corridor of the bank. I begin walking, my footsteps echo in the oppressive silence, and the figure appears. The figure is no longer vague, it is no longer a shifting shadow. It's a full person, bald, in a long dark coat. wet. A face which is soaking through. And the face seemed to be both sorrowful and unnervingly blank at the same time. I remember feeling an inexplicable pull, like it was somehow beckoning to me. I never went. Instead, I would wake up heart-pounding, drenched in sweat, with that sense that something important had been left unsaid or unfinished. But how the hell this could possibly even involve me, I just can't fathom. Then these dreams bled into waking life. I'd find myself checking over my shoulder, expecting that figure to materialize in the mundane settings of my everyday routine. The grocery store, a quiet park bench, a reflection of a shop window. The dread that had once been confined to a foreign bank now shadowed every corner of my existence, definitely blurring the line between memory and reality. I'm writing this over 2 days, and I've recalled something I can't believe about my last night at the bank I left out. I'd planned to leave early the next morning, desperate to get out of that place. That evening, the bank was almost entirely deserted. Again, I was alone, save the usual hum of the air conditioning and the cleaning staff in the corridors. I stayed behind to tie up some loose ends, pack up a few last personal items from my desk, and I found the digital clock in my small office freezing again. Its numbers locked in a suspended moment that felt both eerie and final. As I turned, it was then I saw that figure in full once more, if only for an instant. Back at the emergency exit, where only the light from the exit sign struggled to penetrate the thick shadow. Now it was as real as you or I. Unmistakably human, the dark coat, soaking wet. But I can't describe it. It was a feeling. I felt an overwhelming mix of dread and pity, as if the figure were an echo of a life trapped in perpetual limbo. For a few excruciating seconds, it seemed as though the figure was not merely observing me, but silently pleading for recognition. I debated reaching out a trembling hand, desperate to understand, to connect. But before my arm moved an inch, the moment passed, and the figure dissipated into the shadows. I left Japan the next morning in a rush, boarding the train to the airport with a mind heavy with unanswered questions and a heart weighed down by unresolved mystery. Back here in the UK, I've tried to resume normal life, except the appearance of the thing at my window, of course. Japan refuses to recede, though. The figure in my UK window was a huge event, and I still get occasional happenings in the UK office. I still see the therapist, and I've taken every measure possible to convince myself that the disturbances were confined to a strange old building far, far away. Still, every so often, especially in the quiet moments of dusk or the silence of night, I sense something is not right. I catch a glimpse of a dark shape in the window's reflection. I feel a chill when there's no breeze. Basically, I'm constantly being reminded that the boundaries between our world and whatever might exist on its fringes may be far thinner than I've ever dared to believe. Believe me, I know how all this sounds, but I can only type exactly what happened, or is happening. I hope beyond hope, it is gone. Not a random sentence, please read that as sincerely as the words are typed. Anyway, thank you for reading Anonymous. But Anonymous's experience did not end there. The very next day, I received this email, entitled An Addendum to My Account. Last night, I had a dream that I haven't been able to shake, hence this email. The same figure I encountered in Japan appeared, unmistakable in its vague yet haunting form, and was stood outside my flat here in the UK. I couldn't see it behind the door, I just knew it was there, dripping wet. I awoke with an overwhelming sense of foreboding, as if this presence had somehow travelled the continents and arrived on my doorstep. So I showered to try and shake off the fear, ate my cereal, watched some TV, and left for work. On leaving for work, as I locked my door, I looked down and noticed 2 damp footprints on my mat. I bent down, realizing it was moisture, and looking round I noticed there were no further footsteps up the carpeted landing. I'm typing you this from work after just agreeing to spend a fortnight looking after a friend's place in Cornwall, because I'm only going to fly home tonight, pack a bag, and leave. And I will let you know if anything else does happen. I know people say when they send these emails in they feel cathartic, but for me, I'm terrified. And hopefully that is the feeling that will pass. Thank you again, Anonymous. Thank you, Anonymous, for genuinely providing one of the most different, intriguing, and deeply chilling experiences we've covered all season. We received this mid-season, and I sat on it because I knew from the photo evidence, from the way it was worded, this was a sincerely genuine occurrence. The fact it's ongoing is even better from a podcaster's standpoint, obviously not from our anonymous submitter's standpoint, and I do hope everything you're experiencing ceases. But it is so rare on the Dark Paranormal we receive such an experience that does not have a definitive closure. It does not have, we looked into the history of the place, etc. This is literally, arguably, the most open-ended experience we've ever had. And as our Patreons will tell you, one thing I adore is a paranormal experience that is open-ended, because it allows 2 things. 1, me, myself, to walk away with that on my mind as it's been since I received it, and 2, for you, the listener, to go away and come up with your own conclusions as to what has taken place there. Speaking of Patreons, I must confess, Season 18 has been, for me, the season where our Patreon team have proven their worth in terms to how they shape the show, how they are the voice of the show, and how they drive the show forward. So, without any further ado, I'm going to recognise our newest members to that community. And don't forget, if you'd like to gain access to that Dark Bites back catalogue of over 100 hours of Patreon-only stories and experiences, as well as a brand new 30-minute episode of those experiences each and every Sunday, even on the downtime that's upcoming, then head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal and be one of the first to hear the season debut of Season 19, as well as receiving your paranormal fix each and every week. So a huge thank you to all of our Patreons for making this show what it is evolving into. And a huge thank you to our newest members, who are Rachel Reeves, Christian, Troy, Bald Water Zebra Eating Tomatoes, Mark Laurie, Susan Burkholtz, Jamie D, Andre Schultz, Tracy, DJR, Melissa Kilgore, Fawn, Jennifer Lee White, Harris Dodson, Christopher Feltham, Caitlin Kerr, Jenna Gillay, Carla B, Danielle Vanderwade, Blake, Brinks, Nick Handler, Amy G, Roger OAO, The Intel, and Brittany K. Thank you ever so much, guys, for supporting the show. And Brittany, we got your message to say you don't think you've been read out. From our side, it shows it has been read out, but I'm always going to believe you over me and my small team. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. And everyone, sincerely, I hope you enjoy all of the additional content, the ad-free content, and of course the chance to gain access to that 100-hour back catalogue of Dark Bites. If that sounds like something you'd like to be part of, as well as the amazing community, and believe me, that's not hyperbole. Head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. And of course, from season 19, we revert to putting our Patreon names back at the beginning of each episode. And it is genuinely no exaggeration to say how much impact the Patreon Society has had on the format and evolution of this show, and anyone who's been a Patreon long enough can testify to that. So, if you'd like to play an integral part in our development, head over to patreon.com/The Dark Paranormal. But right now, it's time to put a note in your diary. And that date is Friday the 28th of March, when we will return with season 19. Of course, the week before, as is tradition, we will release a very old edition of Dark Bites. But until then, I want you all to stay safe. Click that subscribe button so you make sure you get the debut episode. And of course, don't forget to head over to youtube.com/The Dark Paranormal. Hit subscribe so you will be the first to know when we release those videos for Dark Realms. So, stay safe for the next few weeks, and I'll see you next time. But remember, when you're discussing the paranormal between now and then, always try to leave some of your disbelief at the door. And until then, I'll see you next time, right here on The Dark Paranormal.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.